Hello and welcome to SOUQ Pulse. This is your program. This is SOUQ News, where we say we are all about positivities. We don't just say it, we live it, and that is who we are. And that is the same thing we preach to you. So it doesn't matter what's happening. Okay, now let's stop that. Now, wherever you're listening to us, watching us, or will watch us later, remember this tagline: never, ever keep quiet. So if that is the only thing you take away from SOUQ Pulse, that is a plus. So here we tell you same thing: talk. Our business is good, talk. Are the bad, talk. The policies, who are they favoring? Talk. How is the rich treating the poor in your place? Now, we are going philosophical, but no matter what it is, on SOUQ Pulse, we talk. Today, we are looking at issues that are going to make us unproductive, making us unproductive. We are looking at waste, like literally waste. We'll go on a very short break. It looks like I've not let the cat out of the bag, right? But definitely, I think I've opened up a whole can of worms, because that is where we are heading to. My name is Chuks, John Rogers Chuks. This is SOUQ Pulse. We'll go on a very short break. I'll open up this topic and introduce our guest, and we will talk and take some responsibility. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is SOUQ Pulse, and we are ready to talk. So today on SOUQ Pulse, we are looking at waste. Like you heard me very well. Waste. Spell. Waste. Now let's look at it the way you will understand it better. Imported waste. Is Africa really aware? For those that are watching right now, you're kind of racking your head or trying to get some understanding about it. Now, everybody is talking environmental sustainability. It hits the headlines on weekly, daily basis. People are talking about extra budgeting on health and health institutions, but most times, a lot of this budget is consumed because we are not taking care of our health, owing to the fact of waste dumping, both the ones we are creating and majorly the ones that we are not even creating. And in most places, the one we are not even aware of, that end up piling in Africa and consuming the health of millions, and we lose money to it. So while we are trying to patch up and cover leakages, are we looking at the waste that is being imported into Africa? We'll get to break every single one of that down and expose some things that you know, but you're not just paying attention. And we'll talk. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to do justice to this particular talk this day is an environmentalist, someone who has taken this particular discussion and action to a level that people are not just aware. But we are bringing him on SOUQ Pulse for today. Your Excellencies, I introduce to you Mr. Philip Jakpor. He is the Executive Director of Benevlyn Development Initiative. Mr. Philip, you're welcome to SOUQ Pulse.
Thank you for having me on your show. It's a pleasure being here to talk about this very, very important subject. I hope I'll be able to do justice. It's a very, very big issue. It's not just for one man. It's a big issue. So let's see the areas I can hammer on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And we are grateful. Yesterday, we should have had you, but some technical issues, and we overcame that. And here we are today, and we are driving right into it. Thank you for that introduction, and we're always grateful. Now, for those that are unaware, Europe produces a lot of waste. The US, the UK, the entire belt on that region, they produce a lot of industrial waste, to be precise. A lot of them are not biodegradable. And now they've been looking for where to transfer this waste. Now, for over 50, 60 years, they've been moving this waste to Africa and some part of Asia. Africa has been taking a large chunk of it. What makes it this bad is that some African countries at a particular point in time even signed some particular treaties to take this waste off these people and dump it on their soil. landfills, however they want to dispose it. And this has been a major issue, thanks to a few people that have stood and said no and keep campaigning against it, like you and your initiative. Thanks to some other presidents that are also standing up to it. But now we are asking ourselves, is Africa, the citizens, you, me, are we really aware of what is exactly biting us, getting our health down, eating our pockets when we don't even know it, before start looking for those sustainability money? Let's dive right straight into this. In our quest to conduct legal business and bring buying and selling, everybody wants to be able to feed your family. That is basic. Now, in this particular quest of getting this done, are we, the people dealing in a lot of this particular product, are we aware of the dangers of the second-hand influx materials heading this way? Those small trader in the market, the ones selling second-hand okrika, the ones selling second-hand electronics, the ones selling second-hand computers, are they really aware of the dangers that these products pose over time?
I think this is a very, very good question to start with. And I think that is the right place to start. Well, I will say over time, Nigerians are getting aware. The level of awareness is not yet where it should be. But we have seen a steady increase in awareness. And this awareness is as a result of a lot of factors. Prominent of which is what organizations like the Standards Organization of Nigeria is now doing, going into markets to sensitize people about the dangers of e-waste, particularly, and then of course textile that what you call the second-hand clothes or krika coming into the country. I want to start by also making a point here that Nigeria is the highest importer of electronics and electrical materials, either freshly produced or waste on the continent. What drew the attention of people to the dangers of some of these things coming from outside, like you have just mentioned, a lot of things coming and people don't even know what they're all about, was what happened in cocoa Delta State, I think in 1987, when an ordinary person, who thought he wanted to just make some money for himself and his family, agreed to store some drums in his compound. He never knew that those were toxic materials until people started dying and people started coming down with different ailments. And that was when Nigeria set up the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. So that was the starting point of this level of sensitization, that some of the things you can bring into the country are hazardous or harmful, either immediately or on the long term. Now for the okrikas I think it's better to talk about e-waste first of all. I think the fact that a lot of Nigerians cannot afford the luxuries of buying brand new television sets, computers, fridges, air conditioners, is actually what gave rise to the importation of these second-hand EVs, fridges, whatever. Everything electronics or electrical coming from outside is because the average Nigerian cannot afford. And then, unfortunately, even in procuring these things, the average Nigerian does not read this manual. People don't read manuals because even in the manuals, you also have some level of education there that, look, don't store this thing close to this place. When you want to discard, you don't discard this way, and things like that. Generally, things that people should read and equip themselves so that once these things are past their lifespan, once these things are damaged, you know where to take them to. But unfortunately, like I said, poverty has played a major role in the importation of these things. And then the level of awareness, like I said, has only started growing with time with the work of SOUQ and organizations like Nesria. If not, even those who import these things, some of them don't even know the dangers of keeping those things in, enclosed places over time, or discarding them in some particular environment, or burning them. You see a lot of equipment that are supposedly, pass their lifespan and are to be discarded, and people start burning them, not knowing that you'll be inhaling dangerous pollutants, things like the persistent organic pollutants, heavy metals that are in the environment. These things percolate into the earth, they leach into the earth. Some of them are in the dust. Some of them find their way into water. The same goes for these materials.
Let's hold on to that thought. Let's hold on to that thought, because right now you are getting into the space of lecturing, which once you get into that spirit, it's going to be difficult to stop you. But now let's go back to the people that are making this money. You mentioned poverty. Can we ever hold poverty as an excuse to go hang ourselves? Because that is where we are going to, even if we are hanging ourselves peacefully. You know, that kind of hanging yourself where you think all is rosy. Example, Europe dumps 90% of used clothes. Most people might not understand this, but a lot of those used clothes are from plastic materials. They are not just the normal cotton that, okay, good and fine, you dump them and a bacteria over time will degrade them and it will turn back to soil. No, a lot of this are of plastic material, and like you said, they find their way into our food and our water and our fish, and we'll eat it again. If people don't know, is it not the responsibility of governments across Africa to sensitize their people?
You've hit the nail on the head. Like I mentioned, some level of sensitization is already going on. But is it adequate? That is the question. It's not adequate enough. This level of awareness, I think civil society like us have done more even than the government. When I mentioned agencies like SOUQ, they only go into the market periodically. So it is not an ongoing thing that is sustained. So maybe once or twice in a year, they go to Alaba International Market where electronics sold, and then start harassing people. Yeah, they do a lot of good jobs too, but then you have a lot of harassment. And then after that, another year. So apart from the sensitization, is the sanction adequate? Even the sensitization efforts and the sanctions that we have made that go with them, do they actually address the problems? There was something that happened recently. I think that was like, I think last year, an e-waste producers responsibility organization of Nigeria was established. And I think that initiative is a good one. Why? For importers of electronics and electricals, they have the responsibility of ensuring that their products, it's a sort of tracking and tracing thing. So for every product that you buy, they can trace, you bought it here. When it's going to be discarded, you have to take it here, and things like that. So it's a tracking and tracing thing, which is good. But is the awareness adequate enough? That's another thing. So it's not only in Nigeria. Textile,
okay.
for instance,
Why we look at this particular awareness you're talking about, we're looking at the sensitization. Let's now ask ourselves this question. You talked about e-waste and you really wanted to dwell on that e-waste. Now, if we talk by population and amount of material coming in, Ghana is most hit when it comes to electronic waste because of their population and what is coming in.
Exactly.
And they have very, I will have to say that again, very bad landfills that these particular things are over and over again burnt. Now, the countries sending this know very well that this has passed their shelf lives and are detrimental to their own people. They now send it there. Our government, both Ghana, those across West Africa and African government, are they ready for the health implications that this are bringing on?
Well, you and I know the answer to that. And the answer, of course, is that we are not ready. what we see to a large extent is cosmetic. And that's why I use the example of Sun or Nigeria going into the market maybe once in a year to be seen as doing something. But the political will to even ban some of these things, is it there? And we're not, that's what we're not seeing. And then, of course, you mentioned some of these countries that bring these things in, they know that the shelf life of these things have, are beyond, have expired. But do we have what it takes in terms of regulations to ensure that some of these things are coming even from China also? Beyond even the textile waste you are talking about, there's also solar panels. Go to the market, you see all sorts of solar panels coming from China or elsewhere. And these things are not biodegradable, like you have just said. Biodegradation of recycling, for instance, of solar panels is more expensive than you know than recycling. So we have this kind of challenges because we don't have governments that are really very, very serious in terms of ensuring that, look, this kind of product should not come into our country. Once it has exceeded its shelf life, it can't come in. It took the disaster that happened in cocoa for the Nigerian government to even know that those drums of toxic chemicals came into Nigeria. So anything can come into the country as we speak today. They are coming from the ports. Some people are bringing it from different sources. So there are leakages. Our
Let's get to
borders
that
are
particular
open. Our
last
borders are
line you
porous.
said. Let's get to that particular last line you said. I had to really bend my head and catch my breath. Now, we know, we might not be able to point direct fingers and call names, but we know that toxic materials come into Africa. You gave an example of cocoa, that was a long time ago, and that environment, they saw the effect. It wasn't good. Now, but we know that there are certain people, be it within or outside government, that somehow directly or indirectly sign for the dumping of these toxic materials in this place. Why is government across Africa not being able to fish these people out and reprimand them for this kind of things? Because it still continues. It has not stopped. It's still there. You still see drums that you can't account for what is inside or where it's coming from in some certain localities across Africa.
One other thing that also is very, very important is that we shouldn't assume that a lot of people in government are even as educated as we want them to be to know some of these things. Because it's just like a child playing with fire. It's only when the fire burns the child a bit that it learns not to go back there. But if not, the average child wants to play with fire. Maybe a baby of 1-2 years, sees fire, wants to play with it, wants to even touch it. But once it is burnt once and he tries it again and it is burnt, he doesn't go back there. So maybe because some of the effects of these things are long term, some of these people in position of authority feel, well, Africans are strong, Africans, our immune system, but it is not true. Some of these things are they have long-term effects. Cocoa did not just happen. Those drums were there for months before they started feeling things. So also, today we also have different ailments in the country. A lot of cancers. People are coming down with cancers and most people cannot even trace the sources of these things. But science has told us some of these things come from what we breathe. The toxic, the textile materials we talk about, when you even dump them in landfill sites and they burn, they emit methane, which is dangerous. They emit methane into the atmosphere. Beyond that, they clog our water systems. The dye gets into our water systems. The e-waste we're talking about, it leaches into the earth. It goes into our food chain. So the question is, these people coming down with different type of cancers throughout the country. Almost every family knows one or two people like that. Where are these things coming from? It's from, our environment. So we don't pray it takes major disasters for us to wake up as a people. But like I said earlier on, because people cannot see these things directly. They can't do the correlation immediately. They feel, well, it's not with us. But the reality is that these things are with us. And we must not wait for these disasters to happen to not only put in place the regulations, which we have. Nigeria has what we call the National Environmental Regulations 2022, which is on electronics and e-waste generally. But how many people even know? How many people know what is in that regulation?
Okay. Now
Did we have adequate
you are mentioning
sensitization by the National
and touching
Assembly?
some particular points where we just have to ask this. Now you mentioned poverty earlier on. Now let's break it down.
Yes.
Poverty, greed. Yes, you heard me. Greed, wickedness, the one that starts with capital letter, then ignorance, or is it just sheer madness? Which of these factors is driving this sort of behavior where Africans are negotiating for the pollution of their own environment?
I think it's everything I've mentioned. So it's not just one. Of course, there's greed and there will always be greedy people. But then there's also ignorance and there will also be a lot of ignorant people. And then there is the fact that how many people have you seen, for instance, even with the cocoa incident, how many people have you seen the government, for instance, parade for importing things or bringing in things that are not supposed to come into the country? We don't see it. So once you don't have those kind of sanctions and people see those things, then there's the laxity. That's why everybody is doing just anything they like. People import just almost anything once they feel you can bring these things. When you're walking on the streets, you see different, shops with imported second-hand electronics, electrical clothes. It's everywhere. So we will not blame all these people and say, oh, they are doing it because of greed. Some are just want to survive and they don't know the dangers of those things, because those things who are around them is equally dangerous. The man who imports substandard electronics materials that are in his shop and is inside with those things day in, day out, some of them are emitting, dangerous. He doesn't know. He does it because he has not been adequately sensitized. But if he has been sensitized and he knows that what he is living side by side with will even affect himself, there's a tendency that there's a conflict in his mind. Once the conflict of, oh, this is dangerous, even to me, gets in, then that is the beginning. That's the starting point. How many students will you meet and, discuss these things with them and they even understand what you are talking about? When we are using the languages, persistent organic pollutants, what does it mean to them? When you're talking about heavy metals, what does it mean to them? So these things are things that we must consciously educate our people. It must be conscious. It must be sustained. It is not one-off. Are these things being taught in the schools? Do students, pupils, do they know these things? Even at the tertiary level, do they know these things? So the awareness is only growing. It is not, we are not where we are supposed to be. That's the point. We are not where we are supposed to be. And that's why civil society like us will continue to do what we are doing, not only to say government should do this, but to hold government to account that, look, the government is not doing enough. And that's what we are saying here.
While civil societies are making sure that they just stand up and count, while people are also going out to educate others. Now, this is the side I don't understand. We still see waste colonialism. In 2024, like today, 2024, why are African presidents and leaders silent at the scale of this in this dispensation? Why?
Well, where will I start from? Some of these leaders themselves are not as educated on this subject. I repeat. Now, most of the statutes, international statutes, treaties that Nigeria has signed on e-waste and the rest of them, you will be quite surprised it was civil society that actually gingered our government people. It's just like the climate talks when we have our government officials go there and most of them are it's just buying spree. What is going on there? The discussions does not mean anything to them. So I don't want to believe that virtually all of them, they even understand these things. And that's why we are shouting and shouting more. for those who even know these issues. Some feel I'm twisted because some of them are not even legitimate governments. So they want to please their taskmasters outside the country. But that is not what we are saying. A nation's people must save themselves. And that's why civil society is playing this role that we are playing. I've mentioned it earlier, and I repeat it, that some of these treaties that even our own government signed, it took a lot of work on the part of civil society to get them to understand what these things are all about, what they should sign and not sign. So, like I said, for them, it's just attending one meeting again where they collect extra codes and travel. But coming back home and doing the proper domestication and then the follow up in terms of, enforcement, these are the areas that, unfortunately, we are not seeing enough work. But then when you even blame agencies like SOUQ and that are going out periodically, you want to ask, are they adequately funded to sustain this, education, this awareness creation? When you go to them, because we have done some, engagements with them, they tell you that they are not funded. They are not going to use because enforcement exercise will not only involve SOUQ, it will also involve the police, it will involve the NSCDC, it will involve National Orientation Agency. Do we have adequate funding for them to carry out these things? Because the National Orientation Agency has the responsibility of, throughout the 774 local governments in the country, and the National Orientation Agency can reach them through local languages, through radios, through TV, shows like what you are doing. But unfortunately, they tell you that they are not adequately funded, and as such, the little they can do is do this 1 or 2 or 3 sensitization that is supported most times by civil society, and then after that they relax. So it is as bad as
Now,
that.
while they relax after that, which we are saying 100% no to, we will go on a very short break. And when we return, we'll take this particular discussion a notch further. Don't go anywhere. This is SOUQ Pulse. Our guest is here, and we are all here trying to make sure that we talk about this and we find possible ways we can engage and keep talking about this till we still start seeing solutions. Don't go anywhere. SOUQ Pulse will be right back. Yes, welcome back. This is SOUQ Pulse, and we are looking at imported waste in direct terms. Imported waste, and we are asking ourselves this question: is Africa aware? Are you aware? To what extent do you know that a whole lot of those particular things in the shops around where you go to shops, they are really waste in the first place? That doesn't matter the short time shelf life where you get to have them. But in the long run, as they are sitting in your house, your office, that is waste. That's what we're talking about. And we'll have Mr. Philip Jakpor doing justice to that. He really wants to school us on a whole lot of things, and we are going there. Welcome back, Mr. Philip.
Thank you.
Look at this now. Aside environmentalists like you, aside campaigners standing up positively for environmental sustainability in Africa, are we as a people, are we ready for this discussion?
Well, I think you being ready for a discussion or not depends on how sensitized people are. I believe if we scale up the sensitization, Nigerians will wake up, and then, of course, this extends to other African countries. The education must start even as simple as our phones. The phones we use. Sometimes you have a phone, it gets spoiled, and it is in the house. You leave it there 1 year, 2 years, children, babies are playing with it and exposing them to danger. So you can see that the level of awareness is so low that go to some homes, you still see videos. You can imagine videos. Nobody buys videos anymore. You still see CDs, VCDs. You still see speakers, old speakers, turntable. You still see cassettes, things that, they are supposed to have discarded that shouldn't be in the homes. They are still in the homes, exposing those who interact with them to the toxins and all those radioactive things associated with these things. So that alone tells you that the sensitization is not enough. The sensitization should be more.
Sensitization is not enough. And
it's not enough.
Both the
and
NGOs,
by the time we do adequate sensitization, we are doing, and I repeat, if even with what we have done all these years, to have this minimal impact, imagine if we did nothing. So it's all hands on deck.
Imagine that. We don't want to go that route, and we won't imagine that. But now, there's this particular place you touched, although you touched on it sparingly and crossed. We get to see a lot of non-governmental organizations. We get to see a lot of government people. When it comes to environmental issues, when it comes to sustainability discussions, talk, seminars, whatever the topic is, we get to see a whole lot of them play in this field. Now, let's ask ourselves directly this question. Is it the money or getting the pollutant out that takes the forefront for most of these parties in this sector?
Education is key. Now, civil society can only do as much as talk, pressure government. The responsibility of making things work, the responsibility of ensuring that laws are in place and that those laws or regulations are enforced is government. And so that is where the problem is. So civil society is doing enough. Of course, civil society can still do more in the area of organizing these trainings, workshops, seminars, workshops, even invite government officials, and they come to talk. But that talk translating into concrete action is always where the issues are. So, and like I said earlier, they will always say there is no money. And once they say there's no money, most of what civil society does is donor driven. You cannot sustain anything meaningful with funding from donors. It must be generated internally. It must be owned by the people and then enforced. So that is where
generated
we have
internally,
a lot of work to do.
Owned by the people and enforced. Now let's look at those particular donor funding. Let's look at those donor funding. For most of this, let me not use the word most, for a lot of these NGOs, a lot of the funding is coming from the same countries where this waste is coming from. Is it not possible to do reverse engineering and they educate their own people? Okay, don't take that waste there. Or if they give us the funding, our people should tell their people, don't bring the waste here.
I think so. Things are changing in that regard. I think some of the civil society discussions, NGO discussions are all about, international binding treaties. And what that means essentially is that, look, if we are saying we are banning waste in Africa, banning the importation of waste in Africa, and anything
okay, I think we lost him for a while. I know he's going to get back. That is where we are right now. We are looking at
maybe
imported waste. For those that are not aware,
we should be able to trace it to particular companies abroad.
Materials used in Africa, you could call it because of poverty. A lot of them have very short shelf lives, and they are discarded where they are coming from, and they are dumping it here on us. Okay, Mr. Philip is back. Can we have you back, please?
Yes, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So now the push among the global civil society community is internationally binding treaties. So if we say we don't want waste in Africa, if a company in Europe ships waste to Africa, it must be held to account. And so it is that's the direction that civil society discussions are going now. That they're called internationally binding treaties.
If a country in Europe sends their waste here, they should be held liable. Who is going to hold them liable?
Yes. Well, we have been given the tools. The treaty is the tool that we can always refer to. And that's why it is internationally binding. So the responsibility of holding them to account then becomes our own, because they are the ones who committed the infraction. If we are able to work with their civil society in their own country, those ones can even institute suits against them. Something happened. I know most of us should be aware of that. With the pollutions in Okoniland, for instance, in the Niger Delta, we've had community people take them to court here for years and nothing happened. And then civil society is there, came up with the idea that, look, why don't we compel their government to open the prospect of these people coming from Africa, coming here to sue them and get justice? And we've had successes in those fields. We have a lot of communities in Ogoniland that have been compensated for what they have been going to court for upwards of even 20, 30 years. And they took the case to the Hague, took the cases to the United Kingdom, and they got justice. It is possible, even in the e-waste sector. So that's why, like I said, you have those treaties, which, all countries are, that's why it's called internationally binding treaties. So it binds all of us. So you cannot dodge responsibility for what you have, your product causes in another part of the world or something like that. But like I said, all these things take a lot of education. Do our people in government even understand what I just mentioned? So if they do, it becomes an opportunity even to be able to, even make money for the country. For the cocoa incident, for instance, who has resurrected that issue to hold the country from which it came from, their government, because their government will not say they were not aware that those containers were leaving their shores. Some of these laws can even apply retroactively.
Okay.
You can go
now,
back.
Let me take some few lines from where you were before you got to this cocoa issue. Now, you're saying if some people in the government are aware. Now, good. Now, they will get educated because they will watch this program. And when they refuse to get educated, those around them will put them to shame. Now, for the cocoa issue, I like your other name. Now, that particular other name, I also look forward to maybe one day seeing in the papers that you are suing someone because of that cocoa issue. Now, let's ask this particular question. We get to see a lot of waste being dumped in the water bodies, the oceans, the seas, and Africa is getting a large portion of it because the water bodies wash them up our shores. Who can we hold responsible for this? Because we know it's coming from the West. It's not coming from Africa. But we are the ones that are suffering it.
Again, I think that's where maybe starting with Africa, we must have collaborations that will entail monitoring our environment. It must start with us, first of all. We have those kind of agreements on the continent. If we have those kind of agreements on the continent and we have countries working together, I think that is a starting point. As it is now, every country is just doing their own thing. But as the momentum grows, so also is the push for collaboration, so that once there's unity on the continent, then this continent can hold other continents to account. That is very, very important. But like I mentioned, and I still continue to reiterate, some of this knowledge were not there before. Even for us as civil society people, some of this knowledge was not there. The knowledge is only increasing. Some of us never saw old electronics from Europe or America or China as any problem until, we started getting this sensitization that, look, this is, what it's going to cost, So the awareness is growing. All we need to do is escalate it and mount pressure on our government to fund not only education, but also enforcement exercise. Let us see 1 or 2 or 3 people that have been used as an example. People who are importing these things, and you have people who are making millions and millions from importation of these things. Let us see these people held to account. But in the first place, even before we go there, who allows these things to come into our country? That goes back to government again. What is the customs doing? How are people able to come with containers? They seal the containers, you don't know what is inside. And by the time they are offloading it, you are seeing old refrigerators, you are seeing old TVs, being shipped from Europe or America, coming into the country, and we're allowing them into the country. Even in the food chain, it's the same thing. That's how you also see rice, that has been in stores for almost 20 years coming into our country. Who allows them in? So this education must be holistic. It must be holistic. But then, even if you have the education, as long as there's still poverty, some of these things will still slip through the cracks, because it has gotten to the point where some people are so desperate to survive, they'll do almost anything. The man who is so poor, he cannot buy a brand new television. His children want television at home. And there's an option of one old TV somewhere that he can, buy for, a fraction of what the brand new one costs. He buys it, puts it in the home. But if the education, like I said earlier on, is there adequately, and he knows that those things might have radioactive materials, he may think twice and will rather save to buy a new one rather than going that way. And then, of course, there are also solutions to some of these things. In the realm of
before you hit the solution button, let's still act on certain issues here. Let's touch base now. Like, this is home. Now we have a plastic policy gradually forming and gradually taking shape. Now we have a ban on polypropylene. Now, do you see that materializing in Nigeria? This is like the second time where that ban has been enforced, and we are seeing some seizures, but we've not seen arrest and all that. But do you see that possibility happening in Nigeria permanently?
Well, once you have people in government who are serious in terms of enforcement and sustaining that enforcement and doing the education, you saw that policy was quite hasty. People just woke up one day and government, it started with Lagos State government, of course, the ban on, those kind of plastics. A lot of industries are currently using those things. You've not given them adequate notice. You've not done a lot of sensitization for the public that also uses those things. And then one morning you just wake up and you have banned it. It doesn't work that way. These things you have a rolling plan. So for the oil industry that produces these kind of products, what are you as a government doing to, win them away from those products, and then maybe pushing them in the direction of papers, use of paper bags or paper packs, innovative solutions? Those things are not there. So it's just like, this is where they generate their money from, and one morning you just say it is banned. It doesn't work that way. There must be a time frame, and there must be this transition to, cleaner, healthier alternatives. Once that is,
let me follow that. Let me follow your line of
fast food industry.
Your line of answer and ask this question. Okay, are we forming our own policy on environmental sustainability, or we are copying from somewhere?
Well, there's nothing wrong in copying from somewhere if you can then localize it. There's nothing wrong in copying, because everything we have been talking about, ban on plastics, ban on e-waste, and the ideas never came from here. The ideas still came from outside. But then when we must make laws and policies that will have a human face, that we want our people to embrace, then we must look at the local environment and see what we'll do about it. I agree totally with the ban on, for instance, the plastics that you have talked about. But then I've been to Ghana, where I've seen that in the fast food industry, they no longer use plastics. They use paper bags. So why don't we start with that, and then have some companies that are already producing paper bags? So the minute you are saying, oh, we want to ban plastics, you are pointing to ready alternatives that people can deploy to, not that you leave a vacuum. There's always a vacuum in our policies, and that vacuum is what people now exploit to clamor for, extended dates in these policies. Once we do these things and we plan them well, I'm sure we are going to make the mark. I repeat again, in terms of the e-waste, textile, solar panels, the sensitization is not enough. It's not adequate. And we have not seen adequate sanctions. We've not seen people
let's hit that particular button, because our time is way, way faster than we are. Now, we are looking at alternative energy. We are looking at other sources of generating energy because the power grid and the national grid is growing. We and lots of other African nations are going the way of solar energy. And with solar energy comes a whole lot of solar panels. And with solar panels, there is a shelf life of 20 to 30 years. And the solar panels that are coming majorly into Africa, you have said this before, they don't meet the standard of these 20 to 30 years. Are we looking at a mass dumping of waste in Africa owing to solar panels?
It's already happening. It's already happening. And then we don't have adequate, monitoring of our, even if you monitor the ports, are you monitoring the porous borders? Nigeria is just like an open market where anybody comes to buy and sell. People cross the borders in, bring things, go out. You have a lot of corrupt customs officials who allow things to come in. So it's just like an open field. So it is not even that we are waiting for that dumping, maybe by 2030. That's not it. It's already happening. You go to go to Alaba International Market and see what is happening there. Go to the major electronics market and see what is happening there. These things are there. They are everywhere. Who is monitoring them? Who is ensuring that they meet the standards? So, and then when you then go to a organization like SOUQ, they say, yes, they want to do something, but they are not adequately funded. So for those that even want to do something, they are not given the incentive to do the work. It's the same thing, for instance, when we started talking about banning some kind of tobacco products. The agency that led and continues to lead that initiative is the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission. But they're only able to go out maybe once or twice a year. What will that achieve? And it goes back to the issue of funding. They're not getting the funding to go out. They don't go out for enforcement alone. They must go with the police. They must go with the NSCDC. They must go with other agencies of government. And these must be funded. And do we have
you're looking at
sensitization?
You've talked funding. You looked at the agencies and you say, okay, this is their duties, but they can't do this because of this, that. Now, let's turn this table. If you happen to be where the authorities and these laws and these powers are that can make these particular changes, what way forward will you say Africa follow this way?
Well, I can only speak for Nigeria for now. Well, if I was in power, one thing I will root for is intensification of education sensitization and adequate funding to ensure that we enforce the regulations. The regulations are in place. We're not talking about new regulations. We're talking about the regulations that are in place. But the enforcement is subject to bureaucracy and other encumbrances because we are not adequately funding those initiatives. That's just where the problem is. That's where the big problem is. Civil society, now, they are doing enough.
One last bit. Enforcement is where the problem is. Okay, now, one last bit before I let you go. I want your candid opinion on this. Is you, Philip Jakpor, on this. Now, between the environment and fossil fuel for infrastructure development, which will you take first as an African?
Well, I will answer this based on reality. And I want to be as realistic as possible because I can answer from both sides of the coin. But let's be realistic. Nearly 60 years, if not 60 years of fossil fuel extraction. How much has it impacted positively on us as a people? I am from the Niger Delta. The Niger Delta environment today, as we speak, is heavily polluted. We cannot eat fish that is caught in the rivers in our backyards. There's no tangible development. We don't have roads. We don't have adequate electricity. We don't have good schools. The basics that will make life meaningful, we don't have it. So the question then is, what has this fossil fuel marriage brought us? It has brought us virtually nothing. We were better off when we depended on agriculture. So the answer to the question you have asked me, the environment first. You have to be alive to be able to talk about infrastructural development. That is
Okay.
very, very important. I'm from the Niger
Thank you
Delta, so
very
I'm speaking
much. Thank you very much,
from where I come
Mr.
from.
Philip. It's been a pleasure having you on SOUQ Pulse. For those that are wondering, Mr. Philip just gave us his thoughts, and his thought is his. I want to say thank you very much for coming on SOUQ Pulse, and we look forward to having you again when we call you next time.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
To everyone that has been part of SOUQ Pulse today, we only have one life to live, and we only have one habitat, which happens to be here, home. It's our responsibility to take care of it. But while taking care of it, don't endanger yourself for things and from things and living around things you use your own money to buy or doing business with. We need to get this knowledge. We need to know what is affecting our health. We need to know where these illnesses, these cancers are coming from. That is personally to everyone out there. And for those engaging in businesses that, okay, it's just to put food on the table and get life together, let's also ask this question. Are you hurting yourself and the environment? Then the government, whose responsibility is it to protect us? What policies are we making and putting on the ground to stop importation of waste? You might not see it as that. All that big conglomerates bringing in toxic is our decision and our talk. And we'll keep quiet. Have yourself a very beautiful evening. My name is Chuks, John Rogers Chuks. Bye.